The setup for months, a Russian state-sponsored threat group known as Laundry Bear has maintained silent, uninterrupted access to the mailboxes of Western government agencies and commercial enterprises. Their weapon of choice? The Zimbra Collaboration Suite. Before defensive agencies caught on, these actors had quietly siphoned off the last 90 days of incoming correspondence, complete internal corporate directories, cached browser passwords, and critical two-factor authentication recovery codes. The core of the vulnerability lies deep within the legacy architecture of Zimbra's Classic UI. Tracked as CVE 2025-66376, this stored cross-site scripting flaw exploits how the webmail client parses CSS import directives inside incoming HTML messages. In a typical web application, rendering untrusted user-supplied markup safely requires rigorous sanitization boundaries. However, in vulnerable ZCS versions, a specifically crafted email bypasses these boundary checks entirely. When a targeted user opens or previews the message, the embedded JavaScript payload executes directly within the context of their authenticated session. It inherits all permissions, session tokens, and access rights of the victim's mailbox without requiring external downloads, credential entry, or malicious link navigation. It represents a textbook example of a view-based exploitation vector targeting legacy enterprise groupware. How the attack happened, the attack chain, relies on precision engineering rather than brute force. Laundry Bear crafts malicious emails containing specialized HTML structures designed to exploit the Zimbra Classic UI rendering engine. When the victim's client processes the incoming message, the parser encounters a malformed CSS at import rule. This directive forces the browser to fetch and execute attacker-controlled JavaScript within an active authenticated webmail session. Because the script executes inside the trusted session context, it completely bypasses standard same-origin policy restrictions. The script immediately initiates a silent enumeration routine. It loops through the document object model to harvest the last 90 days of unread and archived messages, pulls down the entire organization address book directory, and scans browser-cached credential stores. Furthermore, the payload targets specific storage keys used for multi-factor authentication recovery tokens. Once these artifacts are collected, the script packages the stolen data into an HTTP POST request and exfiltrates it to external command and control servers controlled by Laundry Bear. The entire operation executes in milliseconds, leaving no visual artifacts or error prompts on the victim's screen. To the end user, the email simply appears as a blank or normally rendered message, ensuring they remain entirely unaware that their enterprise communications channel has been thoroughly compromised. How it was identified. Discovery of the Laundry Bear campaign required a coordinated intelligence effort across multiple premier cybersecurity organizations. Threat intelligence researchers at Palo Alto Networks Unit 42 and Proofpoint first flagged anomalous data access patterns originating from legacy Zimbra deployments across Western government and critical infrastructure sectors. Simultaneously, telemetry analysis revealed persistent, unauthorized API calls querying enterprise mail directories from unusual geographic points of presence. The investigative timeline traced these indicators back to July 2025, confirming that the campaign had been active for nearly a year without detection. Security engineers noticed subtle discrepancies in webmail server access logs, where HTTP request headers showed unexpected script execution sequences immediately following the receipt of specific external MIME payloads. The "oh no" moment arrived when threat hunters correlated the observed session tokens with unauthorized external data transfers. The National Security Agency and CISA subsequently published a joint advisory confirming that the zero-day exploit required zero user interaction beyond viewing the message. This realization dismantled the long-standing enterprise assumption that simple message previewing was an inherently safe user action within webmail environments. How it was mitigated. Mitigating CVE 2025-66376 demanded an aggressive, multi-layered incident response strategy across all affected enterprise environments. Organizations running vulnerable versions of the Zimbra Collaboration Suite were instructed to immediately apply vendor-supplied patches that overhaul the webmail client's input sanitization routines and strict CSS parsing rules. Where immediate patching was operationally impossible, security teams deployed emergency network-level YAF rules to strip or neutralize at import directives containing suspicious external URIs within inbound MIME streams. Incident responders also executed comprehensive credential rotation sweeps. because the attacker specifically harvested cached passwords and multi-factor authentication recovery codes, simply patching the software was insufficient to secure the enterprise perimeter. Administrators forcibly invalidated all active user session tokens, reset administrative passwords, and forced re-authentication across all connected clients. Furthermore, security teams audited internal mail server access control lists, reviewed outbound firewall rules for anomalous data exfiltration channels, and initiated forensic memory analysis on edge webmail servers to ensure no persistent web shells or secondary backdoors were left behind by the retreating threat actors. The downstream impact of the Laundry Bear campaign is substantial, touching sensitive institutional nodes across Western governments and critical commercial sectors. Because the threat group maintained undetected access since July 2025, the scope of compromised data includes extensive historical correspondence, internal strategic communications, and proprietary commercial records. For affected government entities, the exposure of high-level diplomatic and operational messaging creates severe national security risks. Attackers acquired full visibility into interagency communications, personnel directories, and internal policy discussions over a sustained 90-day sliding window. In the commercial sector, targeted enterprises suffered significant intellectual property exposure as strategic planning documents and executive correspondence were continuously siphoned off through the compromised webmail infrastructure. While agencies have not publicly reported direct physical infrastructure disruptions stemming from this specific Zimbra campaign, the operational intelligence gathered by Laundry Bear provides foreign state actors with a profound strategic advantage. The breach highlights the catastrophic risks associated with unpatched groupware interfaces exposed directly to the public internet, demonstrating how a single, elegant stored XSS flaw can compromise high-trust institutional networks for over a year. Why it matters: the exploitation of CVE 2025-66376 carries profound implications for modern enterprise defense strategies, permanently shattering the myth that email previewing is a passive, risk-free operation. Historically, security awareness training heavily emphasized avoiding malicious attachments and untrusted hyperlinks. This zero-day proves that complex enterprise software like webmail clients can convert a simple, passive view action into full remote code execution and session hijacking. For security architects, the incident underscores the danger of legacy code debt within collaboration suites. Older user interfaces that rely on complex client-side rendering of rich text and dynamic CSS are prime targets for sophisticated state-sponsored threat actors. When an application trusts inbound data structures without rigorous, isolated parsing boundaries, the entire security perimeter collapses. Furthermore, this campaign illustrates the shift towards stealthy, living off the application layer espionage. Laundry Bear did not need to deploy noisy custom malware payloads or drop executable binaries onto disk. They simply weaponized the native functionality of the Zimbra webmail client against itself. Organizations must fundamentally re-evaluate their vulnerability management posture, treating legacy web applications and enterprise groupware with the same rigorous zero-trust scrutiny applied to core operating systems and perimeter firewalls. Takeaway: to protect your infrastructure from similar view-based exploitation campaigns, security teams must take immediate, concrete action. First, audit all internet-facing Zimbra Collaboration Suite deployments and ensure you are running patched builds that eliminate CVE 2025-66376. If immediate patching is not feasible, implement strict web application firewall rules to block suspicious CSS at import handling at the perimeter. Second, enforce a mandatory credential rotation and session invalidation sweep across all enterprise messaging users. Because Laundry Bear harvested cached passwords and multi-factor recovery codes, existing sessions cannot be trusted. Finally, review your organization's monitoring telemetry to detect anomalous directory enumeration queries and unauthorized API access patterns originating from internal mail client sessions. Stay ahead of evolving threat landscapes by subscribing to our technical briefings. Hit the subscribe button below, drop your specific hardening questions in the comments, and stay secure out there.